you start companies thinking that you're going to leave everything open to chance. Like I don't know anything and I'm going to just learn it as I go. But every decision is like, to me, it's just like it's like an unwinding of something that I originally thought.
Welcome to Triangle Tweener Talks, a weekly podcast by builders for builders where we explore the startup journey from the idea to the exit and all the lessons in between, with an exclusive focus on founders from the Triangle region of North Carolina. Tweener Talks is produced by Earfluence. Now here's your host, serial founder and general partner of the Triangle Tweener Fund, Scot Wingo.
In this episode of Triangle Tweener Talks, we have Alex Lassiter. Alex is a local multi-time founder, and in this conversation, we really spend a lot of time on his backstory, where he grew up, his high school experience, and his time at University of North Carolina. And then he worked for a consultancy and then started a startup called Gather. So we get to hear all the great stories that led up to then getting back to the Triangle and starting GreenPlaces. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. I've talked to Alex a lot about GreenPlaces, but I have never had a chance to hear all these great stories that he had. Talking to a lot of founders, every founder has these types of stories where they're like on the hair's edge of failure. Sometimes they fall over that edge and sometimes they don't. So that's what's the most fun to me about talking to other founders is hearing these stories. I hope you enjoy it as well.
I grew up in Charlotte.
Okay.
So just in South Charlotte, kind of what used to be on the line of the edges of town and has now been kind of consumed by Mecklenburg County.
Cool. And then anything special about your upbringing? Was your dad an entrepreneur or did you have entrepreneurial thoughts early on or that came later?
I think I was like I was always like an idea a minute person, and I don't think, for a lot of kids and for a lot of people, I think I always was very envious of people that knew what they wanted to do. Like I was always the kid who was like, I want to do all of these things. I think I wrote like a thing in second or third grade about how I really liked Leonardo da Vinci, not because he was doing, cool art or whatever. It was just because he just got to do all the things. Like, and I just wanted to be an everything person and just do all that. My dad was a lawyer. And so I was like those kids in school who are like, I'm going to be a lawyer or I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to be an astronaut. Like they knew what they wanted. And I was always stressed because I never really did. But my dad was an entrepreneur, he in high school or maybe middle school, he left his practice and started a staffing firm, got some investors and kind of did. I didn't think about it like that at the time. I just I think absorbed kind of what he was doing. But I was always into doing things and always have been. I started a charity in high school. It was called Brick by Brick. It was a bunch of buddies of mine. And the idea was we were going to collectively pool we were all public high school kids. Mm-hmm. So we were going to pool all of the public high school seniors or graduating seniors. And instead of doing like a senior gift to the school, we thought like we're going to do sort of a gift to the community because, public schools, your education's paid for by everybody else. Yeah. And so what we did was we raised a bunch of money. We got to go on the field. I have a giant check. I got to go on the Panthers field and receive, which I carry around with me everywhere. It's amazing.
Yeah. How much did you raise?
We raised $78,000.
Holy cow! Wow.
And then we built a house. So the idea was we were going to build finance and build a house with Habitat for Humanity for somebody who needed it. So we had like 15 high schools represented in North Carolina. We raised the money like right before the end, and then got out there and actually like put shingles on roofs and built the house, and it's still there. It was really cool.
Very cool. Awesome. So then you got out of high school and you decided to go to
Carolina.
Yeah. University of North Carolina for those that
the
get
University of North
confused
Carolina. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
I'm a South Carolina grad. If you didn't get that reference, we call ourselves the Carolina down there. Yeah, it's super confusing. And then when you went to UNC, what did you study? And had you kind of drilled in on entrepreneurship or still wanted to be a Renaissance man?
I was still an everything guy. So I came in, I took all kinds of classes. I ended up going to the business school, the undergrad business school. I think largely because, again, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I think I was just trying to push in a direction of something that I think could lead to an outcome. But I did a lot of stuff in college. I was a Morehead Scholar, so I got to travel everywhere. So I was teaching English in China. I was climbing mountains in Wyoming. I was just doing all kinds of stuff and kind of got exposed to a lot of the world pretty quickly.
That Morehead Scholar, you have to apply. It's very competitive. At that point, was there an interview?
Okay, yeah. So it is really competitive, and it's funny. We went to a pretty big public high school, and schools in North Carolina get certain numbers of nominations depending on how big it is. And at the time, our school had 4 nominations, and I didn't get any of them. My mom at the time was like, if you've already filled out the application, it's like a 20-page application. She said, you might as well just send it in, because what they do is they have a pool that comes in from the feeder schools. And then they have this sort of general pool. She's like, you have no chance. If you didn't even get a nomination, you're probably not going to get it, but you've already done all the work. So just why not? So I submitted it in directly with kind of the general pool, got an interview, kept getting interviews, kept going to the next stages. And, I like to say I was like the last guy in the door, but I was like the last guy in the door. And none of the people in my school got it. And it was awesome. I mean, it was a life-changing experience.
Yeah, I didn't know you at the time, but I imagine you being quite a precocious senior in high school.
I think I was always really good at talking. Like I wasn't good at written stuff. Like I think my SAT, we had to do the written thing. It was like a new thing. And the feedback was needs remedial English help.
So I have that. No one can read my handwriting, so I don't know what I'm saying.
They're like, this guy just got something, but it's not really, doesn't really fit. So, I always felt like I was good at relating to people. And I think a lot of it is just, I like people. I like to talk to people, and I don't have a big ego. And I just generally enjoy hearing from people and talking to folks. And so I just kind of felt like if I could get in the room, then that was going to let my, personality shine. But the written piece of it and everything else probably wasn't as good as most people were. So
cool. So that's a full ride, right?
That was it's crazy.
That's
it was
awesome. Yeah.
Full ride, 4 summers. I traveled in Europe for almost 9 months, sleeping on the couches, met my wife out there. Mm-hmm. I saw everything. It was amazing.
Very cool. And then was she on a similar kind of a?
She was studying abroad in Florence, Italy. I had studied abroad for a semester in Eastern Europe in Prague, and basically just stayed. And so I was writing this like research report, which is kind of one of the summers that you did. It was following jazz shows all over Europe.
That was your research report?
Yeah. Is somebody sort of crafted towards what I wanted. She was like, are you really interested? I was like, oh, I'm interested in traveling, but this kind of works. And anyway, I was just going town to town. So I'd have like a festival in some random city, in Italy or in Croatia or Montenegro or something like that. And I would email people ahead of time on this website called Couchsurfing. Mm-hmm. And what they would do is they'd basically respond back and say, yeah, you can sleep on a couch. Mm-hmm. And it was free. And so I did that, and I was bouncing around, and I was in Montreux, Switzerland at the Montreux Jazz Festival. And I think I was just homesick. I was just like, I got to go. I need to get out. I need to do something and see people that I knew. And a lot of my friends were studying abroad in Italy. But what I did was I went to bed that night. I sold the rest of my tickets to the show. I went to bed one night, and I decided I'm going to send out 2 requests on Couchsurfing. So one would be towards my buddies, the people that I knew in Florence. Mm-hmm. And the other was to go to Pamplona and do the running of the bulls. Oh. And I thought, this is like a 20-year-old. So this is 20-year-old thinking. And I was like, whichever one responds first, I'm getting on a train, I'm going. And they responded first. So I came down, and I met Ann that night. I got there, saw my friends. We went to a Yin Yang Twins concert. Mm-hmm. And which I went to Carolina the other day and told the story, and they said, who's the Yin Yang Twins? I was like, man, that's crazy. But I met her there, and we started dating a couple weeks later. First date was at a Van Gogh exhibit. It's been downhill since for her. So we met, we started dating 2 months later, and we've been together since 2008. So
awesome. Yeah. So your choice was you could have either gotten gorged by a bull or met the love of your life.
One of the two.
Yeah. I think you chose wisely.
Yeah. You gotta know what you're worth, you gotta leave it up to fate.
Cool. So you come back from all that, and then you're out of school. Mm-hmm. And then did you go through the normal job search thing and
I did.
Get your resume on the portal and at Carolina and all that jazz?
I did. I had a professor, who said, consulting is sort of like the everything guy job. Mm-hmm. He said, this is something where you can kind of work in a bunch of industries, and we thrive on people who are smart, but like don't know what they want to do. So I applied to a number of places and got a job at Bain Company. And did an intern summer there, and then got accepted to do a full-time. But in the interim period, a buddy of mine that I traveled with had started a company out in Seattle. And he said, your job isn't going to start until the fall. Why don't you just come out to Seattle and you come work with me and see what this is all about? So I was like, all right, that sounds great. I've never been to Seattle. And so I flew out there and I was working at a company called Intern Match. And I was their first intern. And it was like a TV show. Like there was 3 founders and me. We slept in the house that we worked in. I slept under the desk of the VP of engineering or whatever, his title was. We paid him in Diet Mountain Dews. So that was part of his stipulation was a Diet Mountain Dew. And I remember there was like an argument because his supply, he would come and work through the night. So he'd get there at like 9 and he'd just work through the night. And so if the Diet Mountain Dew wasn't there by like 9, it was like a big issue. And one time it wasn't, and it was an issue. But we
do you do anything cool with the cans? Those kind of people are like, they do like pyramids with the cans and all kinds of stuff.
It looked like a desk like this, and it was just a pile. It was just an incredible efficiency of Diet Mountain Dew. And he would work through the night, and he was super smart, and we had a great time. I did a pitch. The thing they let me do was a pitch competition. So there was like a local kind of startup pitch for investment type thing. Winner would get like 10 grand or something. Mm-hmm. And I'd convinced them that they should let me do the pitch. And then at the end, I'll surprise them and tell them that, Intern Match trusts interns so much that they let an intern do this pitch. And I nailed it. And we won the whole thing. And it was awesome. And I was like, this is the best life ever. So then I went and worked for Bain for about a year and a half. It's a little different experience, but it was good. Like, it was really cool, but a little different life.
You got very good at PowerPoint.
I'm super good at PowerPoint. Yeah. That is a defining skill in my life. Yeah.
Yeah. We worked a lot with eBay, and they had John Donahoe, who was the CEO of Bain, probably when you were there.
Yeah.
He came to eBay, and all they started doing was working on slides because it was all about like presentations.
There's
not
rules.
Like
There's a handbook. Yeah. There's a handbook. Like it's like these colors are these way. They had a private version of PowerPoint that was only exclusive to them. And after you left Bain, you could buy it, and it had kind of special charts and all kinds of stuff that we would use. But yeah, that was the thing about it that I think is really interesting, because I actually learned a lot at Bain and really enjoyed it. But like so much of getting something to work or getting people to believe in what you have is how you present it. Like the best idea in the world, if presented poorly, it just doesn't get the message across. And so they do that for a reason, and it really does work. Like learning how to communicate clearly is really hard. It's about taking just really complex things and drilling it down to what people care about. So yeah, I made 1 million slides, and I've still made 1 million slides, and it was really, really good training.
Yeah. So when you were at Bain, where were you, and were you working on a certain vertical, or did you cut across verticals?
So I was in Atlanta, and for those of you who don't know, there's Bain and then there's Bain Capital. So Bain is like the consulting kind of McKinsey-like company, and then there was Bain Capital, which is a private equity company. But Bain Consulting secret sauce was like they were number one in private equity consulting, and it was kind of like a SWAT team of people who would work in the private equity practice, which I did. And they'd basically, a company wants to buy a company. They would say, we've kind of done our due diligence, but we're going to give Bain 4 weeks to kind of give us their readout. What's the market like? Is this a good idea? Is it bad? Interview a bunch of people and
SWOT analysis. You got to do a SWOT analysis
in a short amount of time.
Yeah.
And basically they sometimes they made the decision or they didn't, but like we would work on cases that were really, really fast, really long hours. And, you'd start a meeting with like, what do you know about the chicken wire industry? And within 4 weeks, you had to be able to explain to somebody the next 10 years of the chicken wire industry. Mm-hmm. So I worked in, for pretty much like 14 or 15 months, case after case after case, and I did everything. And I think one of the things that I think kind of drove me towards like what I do now, I learned that there's a million ways people make money. Like, in college, you would ask me, I would have said, you either do marketing, you do sales, you're a doctor, profession, something like that, or a banker. And like, those are it. Those are the only things that people do. When I left Bain, what I learned was like, people can create things of value. And it's many times those are the people that are the most interesting, that are just kind of like finding something and making it. And we did everything. We did, one time they paid us to go, up and down the East Coast and go to Bojangles. So we were working on a deal where they were trying to decide if they'd buy Bojangles. And so we'd have breakfast, lunch, dinner, and late night at Bojangles, churches, Popeyes, Chick-fil-A, everything. And we would sit in bushes and jump out because the signs say no solicit, like we were soliciting. So we would just like jump out and be like, hey, like why did you buy it here? Was it that the biscuits were, fluffier or whatever? And we'd have to write down that quote. We'd have to go through the drive-through and like mess up orders and come back and see if they got it right. And then at night, we would call these guys up in Boston and they would say, what did you learn? And we'd say, well, this guy said that the biscuits were fluffier. And they're like, oh, the fluffier biscuit. Can you describe the fluffiness? And, they're writing it down and it's like showing up in a deck somewhere.
Yeah.
We had all kinds of stuff like that.
Sounds like almost as good as the jazz research. Yeah. Doing some Bowberry research.
The best one I did, and it's reflective of my comments earlier about cold calling, but when I was an intern, the case that we did was basically an extremely open, this is 2009. So it was an open-ended thing of like, basically this company did data analytics and what they wanted to pay Bain to do was to like determine where it would be the most effective. So like an analytics solution, they're like, where could we sell this? And we had this partner who sat across the table and was like, you're going to do like healthcare, like you're going to do like banking, you're going to do like credit companies, and this is like individual people. So everybody had their own thing. And like mine was like government. And so I'm, 19 years old and I have to like figure out if this analytics solution that I don't even understand what it would be applicable to the government. And I spent a week trying to figure out how much money the Department of Defense spent on data analytics solutions. And I cold called the DoD for, I think, 7 hours of phone tree. So this person talked to so-and-so, this person talked to so-and-so, 7 hours, sitting in a room, just calling, because I kind of know how much they spend overall, but I have to know like what percentage. And finally, I got to this guy at the end and I said, how much do you spend on credit and data analytics? And I said, are you the right guy for that? And he said, yeah, I am the right guy for that. And I was like, okay. Been on the phone for 7 hours, like how much you spend on it? And he just said, the only thing I can tell you is that my name is Dave. And I just like wrote down the quote and I was like, I'm done. So I took it back and I was in the deck and said, the only thing I can tell you is my name is Dave.
Promotion.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So then you did Bain, you're in Atlanta. How did you end up getting into your first startup there?
So, at a lot of these companies, you tend to do it for a couple of years and you go off and do something in a business school or something. And so I had known that I was going to go off and try something different. And my idea was I was going to be a venture capitalist because I had decided that was like the coolest job you could ever have. And I went out and interviewed a bunch of VCs. I got to the final interview of a big SF VC, a big name guy. And I get to the final interview and we kind of go through the whole thing. And he says, what questions do you have for me? Which was like, that was always like my, like, you always have you always have a good question. So my question was like, if I come in here and I, bust my ass and I'm the first guy in and the last guy out and I learn and do everything that you do, like, am I going to beat you? Yeah. And he leaned back and just said, absolutely not. He was like, what do you think? Like, you think I was like an analyst at a VC firm? I like started like, Echo Sign or something like that. Like, he's like, I went out and started something. He was like, you've taken like a very risk averse path your whole life. You came out of school, you went to the best job, then you just kind of did that and you get promoted and whatever. He's like, you haven't taken any risks. He's like, you're never going to like make anything if you take risks. He's like, sure, you should come work here and you can be smart and all that stuff. But like, you'll never be me if you don't do something. And so I went home and I quit Bain. And I had a buddy who was kind of in that same boat, and we both quit like a couple of days from each other. I had a terrible idea, and went out and started it. So that was kind of I would say it was like a ripcord approach.
Yeah,
it was a naive 21-year-old ripcord approach. Like, guy tells me to do it. All right, whatever, fine. You tell me I can't take a risk. Like, fine, I'll just quit my job.
Were you married at this point?
No, but I'm still dating Ann.
Okay, all right.
Unfortunately, I'm married to the same person. Yeah.
So she knows she was getting herself into.
She probably knew the tip of the iceberg, but she didn't know where his head is.
Is that what became Gusto, or?
So, no. So the first idea we had was called Frequenter, and I won't go through all these ideas, but the first one we had was called Frequenter, and it was supposed to be like a better Yelp. And that was what we started on, and we pivoted that business within 3 months. Like 3 months later, we were like, Google already did something like this, and we're like, this isn't going to work. Yeah. So then we pivoted to another company also called Frequenter, and we did that one for about a year and a half, and then that didn't work. And then we did 3 other companies. We had one company called Table Now, and have I told you the story?
No.
All right. So Table Now. So this is 2012 or something. This is when
Open Table.
Well, it's funny you ask. So it was when Hotel Tonight came out.
Okay.
So Hotel Tonight came out, and it was like, this is it. This is like last minute reservation. So we said, let's do that for restaurants. So instead of Hotel Tonight, we'll do Table Now. And it was this app that we built, and basically it was only open for like 3 times a week. So if you logged on the app, it would just sort of have this little like guy that would kind of like check his watch and stuff and count down. And then Friday evening, it would buzz and it would say, okay, like, Table Now is live.
So kind of like what we call a drop today.
It's a drop, yeah. Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday morning for brunch.
Mm-hmm.
And we had like a group of friends that were like using it and stuff like that. And it was pretty cool. Like you just, you kind of like said, this is the type of food I want, this is how many people I have. And you can only say like, I want to eat now. And when you press that, the app would spin and it would tell you last minute reservations that are available. And then you could book them and you could go do it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we didn't actually have that technology. So what actually happened was every Friday night, we would sit in the office, me, Nick, and Tom. And Nick and I were upstairs, and we had like a bunch of phone numbers on a spreadsheet. And Tom was like on the computer. And so when somebody would press the button, he would like trigger the app to spin and pretend like it's loading. And then he would yell upstairs and say like, Scott wants dinner now. And he like prefers Mexican. And so Nick and I would just power dial and, hey, this is Alex at Table Now. Do you have any reservations available? If they said no, we'd be like, hang up. And we go to the next one. And we would just go down until we found 3 that said yes. Then we would yell down to Tom and say like, these 3 restaurants. Tom would plug it in. And then it would be like, surprise, we found you 3 reservations. And then when they clicked one, then he would yell back and be like, Scott's coming now. And then we would call the restaurant and be like, Scott will be here in 15 minutes. And we did that every Friday night and Saturday night and Sunday morning for like 2 months.
Yeah.
And eventually
that's what we call an MVP. Today's fancy language.
So
I call it hamster net. I think most people call it sneaker net, but yeah.
Finally, we got to the point where we said, we got to start like making money. Like we got to start like monetizing. And anyway, so we did our calls or whatever. And Saturday night, we sent some guy to a restaurant. And I sauntered into the restaurant on Sunday morning and said, hey, I'm Alex at Table Now. You've probably heard of me. We've been sending reservations over. Our free period is over. We'd like to collect money for the reservation, and our rate that we had told them was like $2.50 per diner. And I came in and I was going to collect my $5 because they had 2 people. And this guy... like the people I know, this is like 2 years out. I'm very poor at this point. And I like knew a lot of people. And so I'm like at this nice restaurant where there's people that I know sweating, like, just not in good shape and been up all night doing this stuff. And this guy is like, I'm not paying you a dime. And I was like, yeah, but they came, like they did, look at me. Like I'm trying to do a job, like, look at me. And he was like, pull out the receipts or whatever. And they downloaded the receipts and came back. And he was like, this person only ordered a dessert. I'm not paying you a cent. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, I was like, I can't even get this guy to pay me $5. Like, and so I came home and was like, guys, I don't know what good looks like, but like, this is definitely not what success looks like. So we closed Table Now, basically that day.
Yeah. Interesting. Cool. How did that then... So you're in the restaurant business.
So every idea, there's a long story, but every idea sort of has like sort of a 90 things didn't work, 1 thing did, and like, let's go explore that. So
what was the hook that got you on
the hook for that one is we can't run a business if we can't control reservations. Yep. We can't be in a business where like we can't control the product that we're selling. Mm-hmm. And Table Now, like we had no path. At one point we're going to do like a movie phone thing. We're going to use like Twilio to like make the phone calls. But we just couldn't control the inventory. And so it made it really hard for us to actually be able to sell. And what we found in the process was in a restaurant, about 70% of the reservations are handled by OpenTable or, Resi now. Mm-hmm. But restaurants will have excess capacity, usually to the tune of about 30% that are reserved for parties. and they'd never planned those reservations on OpenTable. So if you wanted to do a happy hour or a wedding or a corporate event or private dinner, anything like that, that was inventory that OpenTable did not manage.
Yeah, it's usually gated like in a different room, like physically gated as
That's
well
exactly
as
right.
digitally gated. Yeah,
that's exactly right. And there's lots of reasons why, like because a restaurant runs on just-in-time inventory, and they know that a private party will drive in not only just guaranteed revenue, but it's a higher profit margin. Mm-hmm. And so there's a calculation going on in every general manager's head that says, could I fill this room with regular seats or could I fill it with a party? So they're always making this like decision on whether or not they're going to open that space up to the public or not. So it makes it really hard to make those reservations, and it makes it really hard for a restaurant to be able to kind of manage it.
Yeah.
So we basically said, okay, we're going to build a business around that problem, and we're going to try to go get that inventory and eventually be kind of like a marketplace where you can go and book these events online.
And is this you, Nick, and Tom still?
Me, Nick, and Tom.
The three
yeah.
musketeers on that one? Okay.
Yeah. Ann and I at this moment are living in a attic above a Chinese restaurant in Atlanta. And it had one window with a window unit on it that couldn't close. And every evening the wind blows in Atlanta because it's so hot. Mm-hmm. And it would blow trash into our house.
And mosquitoes probably.
Our house was so small. It had no doors.
Yeah.
In the room or whatever we were in. And I'm only 5'9", and my head touched the ceiling and everywhere, with the exception of the very center of the kitchen.
Yeah.
So she was really, really excited that I was going to start something else at this point.
Yeah. She's like, how do I hitch my wagon to the star?
She's like, it started out pretty good and it just keeps getting worse. So we worked a lot. So, I mean, a lot. And we really were like, had no money. I mean, none of us had.
So you had this idea on inventory. Then did you start an LLC and like do all the right things, or you kind of like realize?
We had like a lawyer, and he'd kind of like build little like vehicles and stuff for us. Okay. So this was, it was running as a C Corp or something like that. And so it was a real, it was a real company. It just made no money.
Yeah.
But we were all financing ourselves. Like we had little family and friends like 2 years before that gave us some money to just like go out and try to live. But like, I mean, every day was deep in the red.
Yeah. So you're at the tail end of that probably too.
We are at the nothing. Yeah. I mean, we had already gone through the long conversations of what are you going to do? Maybe I'll go to law school, or maybe I'll see if Bain will have me back, or, I mean, it's a really dark time. Like we had nothing. And meanwhile, all of our friends were driving nice cars, and they'd still stay to Bain and they're making $250,000 a year, and we're like, I can't even afford. I used to drink these beers called Simpler Times that we would buy at Trader Joe's that were $2.99 a six pack. They had like sand in the bottom of them. It was just a crazy experience. But the blue chicken thing was because we didn't have any money. We would work in this office that this guy let us rent, and it was in not a good part of town. And every day we had it'd be like Scott's day to provide food for me, Nick, and Tom. Mm-hmm. And we had a crock pot. And so you'd bring in something and you'd put it in the crock pot and cook all day. And then we'd break at like 8 and eat and then go back to work. And
8 p.m.
8 p.m. Yeah. And the blue chicken story was basically one time Tom he discovered that you can buy beans cheaper if you buy them dry, because canned beans are very expensive. Yeah. And
this is how you're poor, when you're like doing the dollar per bean calculation.
So he had found this recipe where he could basically for like $3 feed us for like 2 nights. And it was this big thing of black beans, really discounted chicken, and we would just put it in a crock pot. And we didn't know how to do that. So we didn't know how like, wash stuff and everything. So anyway, he cooked it, and it came out to be this like blue chicken, because like the chicken took on the color of the unwashed beans, and we just ate it in just silence. Like, it's just like, this is it. Like,
did it kill you on the other side, or you survived you didn't get salmonella from that?
At that time, I mean, everything was probably killing me, it was a dark time. It was just one of those moments where I was just like, man, you had the high point of being in Seattle and kind of doing all the fun stuff. Like, I'm in the depths. It was not a fun person to talk to. I remember I'd go to events and people would ask me, and I was like, startups suck. Like, this isn't fun at all. Like, no one's giving me money. I don't have anything. Like, I can't even talk to my family about this. They're like, they don't even ask about the business. They mainly just are like, do you feel like you're done? I get the
Ready to
honey.
give up yet?
I get the, honey, you've done a great job. You said what you were going to do. Like, it might be time to grow up and start to do this. So anyway, one more idea, which was what became Gather. And, again, we had all the girlfriends together, and we said, we're going to kill this business. And they were like, good, I'm proud. And you're like, but we have like one more idea we're going to do. And they didn't even talk to us. They were like, that's not a good idea. But
that was the inventory.
Yeah, it was the inventory. Yeah. Private events. We were going to basically build a way to make that easier. Like, the way the restaurants manage it is they use this thing they call the Bible. And so it'd be like a giant 6-ring binder of like every private party or wedding that would happen. And there's one person who would do it. And we were going to like make that digital. And, we built our very first version of that in a pretty short amount of time. It was basically a calendaring tool.
Yeah.
And
did you learn to code at this point, or was some of your co-founders coders?
Tom was a coder.
Tom was a coder. Okay.
So Nick and I were generalists.
Yeah.
And we didn't have a coder. And probably the best sale I did was Tom. Like, Tom was a guy, like, I went on LinkedIn and I just started. It was right when people used to put in like what they did. And I was just like typing in words like Python, like Ruby on Rails, like, all that kind of stuff. And he popped up, and he was about 4 or 5 years older than I was, but he was in my fraternity. So we had like known each other through my brother. And I called him. I was like, hey, I heard you do, Python. And he was like, yeah, I'm getting into that. And that's kind of what I'm interested in doing now. I think he was like a defense contractor or something at the time. And anyway, I talked to him for 5 hours in the Philadelphia airport on the way to my brother's bachelor party. And by the end of it, he was like, you know what, I'll come down to Atlanta and I'll come check it out. So he flew down to Atlanta, stayed in the kitchen. And by the end of the weekend, he was like, this is great, But by the way, like, the business he said this was great on was like Table Now. Like, he was like, this is great. And we're like, no, it's not. But, I'm glad that you believe in it. And so he became our technical co-founder.
Got it.
And so he built all the original code. But we, I forget what month it was, but we had kind of already had all these conversations of like, we're all going to go back and move in with parents and like figure something out. And it's probably two years into the experience. And we had this calendar tool thing, and we booked a meeting with a local restaurant called Murphy's. It's like on the corner in Virginia Highlands, which is where I lived. I met with the owner and, did my pitch. And he said, this seems pretty interesting. Like, how much, would you charge? And I was like, anything, but I was like $80 a month. And he said, I think I could do $80 a month. And I was like, great. I closed my first deal, like, ever. I mean, that was the first deal ever closed.
Yeah.
And he said, how are you guys take on any financing? And I was like, oh yeah, we got tons of people, but we just haven't pulled the trigger on anything. And he said, well, if there's room, I'd like to invest. I'd put in, $25,000 or something. So I came back to the office and I said, Nick said, how did it go? And I said, well, great. He wants to buy it and he wants to give us $25,000. And Nick said, all right, well, let's get him to sign this. So we printed out like a convertible note, and I went back and was like, sign this. And he signed it. And then I came back and said, we raised $25,000. And
that's how you knew you were onto something. It was easier than the $5.
We went to the next demo. Guy Fred Castellucci, he was kind of our age. He was kind of starting in restaurants and stuff. He said, that's pretty good. I'd buy it. About $70, $80 a month or whatever. And I said, it's funny, like the first guy I met, he bought it on the first demo. And then he told me he wanted to invest $25,000 into it. And he was like, well, who was that guy? And I was like, well, it's Tom Murphy. And he said, well, if Tom does it, I'm doing it. And then I gave him the thing, and then he signed it. So then we were like, we closed 2 deals. We had, first 2 investments, from customers and stuff. And then we had probably like 7 to 10 days to basically cobble together anybody that was remotely interested in giving us money. And pulled in, I think, probably close to like $200,000. We had one guy that was like kind of like an angel type person. His name was Stefan. He was amazing. And he was like, if those people would invest, like, I'd be kind of stupid not to. Mm-hmm. But meanwhile, like, my bank account was at zero. I mean, I didn't have money to pay the rent. Anne was kind of working, or she was working, but like, we didn't have anything. Like it was going to zero. And so all these deals, I was like, if we don't get this money, like I'm not like, there's no, like my personal runway is like a week. Like I don't have, like, we can't even deliver this thing.
Yeah.
And so if that money hadn't hit, like it would have just never worked. And I remember at the end of the month, I was kind of just like ignoring my landlord, you know, because I was waiting for like all the checks to clear to like hit my bank account.
The dude that owned the Chinese restaurant downstairs? So probably a little aggressive.
yeah, not a nice man.
Yeah.
No, I think like, I mean, I remember when we got that place, the guy was like, this is not fit for two people. And we were like, well, we need it for two people. And anyway, the money cleared and, you know, I got a not really a paycheck. I think I got like $1,000 or whatever it was, just put it right in his hands. And we were revenue cents. I mean, it was like every day was like, this is it. This is all we need to do. And so I was just absolutely annihilating the phones and doing everything I could to just like sign deals. Cause it was truly like, if we didn't, you know, we wouldn't make it.
Yeah. What year did you start gathering?
This was 2012 or something. So I was probably 26, 24 at the time. Great. I mean, it was a great experience, full of even more just stuff. I always talk about, I was like, you know, you always hear the startup story. Like, you know, I was at Harvard and had this great idea and like it's Napster. Yeah. Like we were like, not that. We were the exact opposite of that. Yeah. We were like, everything we do sucks and nobody likes it and nobody will give us money. And this is the hardest thing ever. But we just kept grinding. I mean, it was just like an insane amount of like work that would go into doing this. And Nick would kind of like develop out the product with wireframes. Tom would sort of build a product and I kind of did all the other stuff. And we just kept going and going and going.
Did you do titles or were you like the titleless founder kind of thing?
I mean, at that point, no. Like at that point, nobody, we were just like, we're Nick, Tom, and Alex.
Sometimes you're so busy, you don't even have time to really.
It just, there was a point where we started to discuss and, you know, Nick at this point was more, you know, interested in kind of the like CEO, like I'm going to go raise the money. I'm going to go kind of do the product stuff. I'm going to kind of build out the org and all that stuff. I was I'm going to go out and sell 1 billion people and, you know, I'd run sales and customer experience and I'll get them all through that. And then Tom, you just make sure that the software works and you keep doing what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And so we ran like that for a long time. You know, it was interesting because I think like coming as a generalist, and I have this conversation with people all the time, especially smart people, you know, they want to come into a startup and say like, I'm really smart. I can do anything. And when you're in a startup, you're like, I don't need people who can do anything. I need somebody who can do one thing. And, you know, I always tell them it doesn't matter if you're really good at those other things. What you need is somebody you can trust who can do those things. Like I eminently trusted that Nick would make really good decisions on his side. And he eminently trusted that I'd make really good decisions on my side. And because we were generalists and both smart, when we came together and would try to figure something out, we both really trusted each other's opinions. So if I felt strongly, then it was going to weigh. And if he felt strongly, it would weigh too. So it worked really well from a partnership perspective, but we just really had to specialize. Otherwise, there was just too much to happen. You know, a company with 3 people has as many functions as a company with 1,000. Yeah. It's just 3 people do them. Like it's not that those functions don't exist. You know, there's still partnerships. There's still, you know, accounting. There's still HR. All those things exist. It's just like, it just all flows to
3 people.
Whoever's at the table. Yeah.
Yeah. So then did you guys raise more capital or is the convertible note it?
So basically we got to the point where we could go out and raise like a what we call as a Series A, which today people would probably call like a seed or something like that, from a San Francisco VC. And we talked to a bunch of people, but ultimately got hooked in with this group called Storm Ventures. You know, at the time, I remember we sat down. He said, guys, this is the most cash efficient business I've ever seen in my like 20 career. I've never seen anything like this. He was like, do you realize that if your salespeople aren't at like 97% quota attainment, like it's completely underwater? Yeah. And we were like, no. And he was like, I thought that we were only outbound. He was like, I thought an only outbound team really needs 20 to 30K per deal. Mm-hmm. He's like, your ACV is like $890 and it's all calling and virtual sales and all of that. And it's just one of those things where I look back and I was like, there's just no way that was the smartest way to do it. But for us, it was just like, we were just kind of going from what we had. I mean, we bought this book called Predictable Revenue and that was literally like how to do sales as a dummy. And so I just read it in a night. I was like, guys, this seems like a good idea. Like, I'll just do this. And so I just followed that thing exactly. And, you know, it worked pretty well.
Did that mean just like raising the prices or?
All predictable revenue does is it basically said, it was started by this guy. It was written by Jason Lemkin, and who started SaaStr and EchoSign or one of those things. And basically it's the whole idea of like an SDR model.
Okay.
You know, this many calls, this many meetings, this many demos. It just turns it into a machine.
Bookings per rep and all that kind of the way to measure a go-to-market team.
Exactly. It's I was thinking of it as like it's like Moneyball for sales, where it's like it doesn't matter how good the seller is at the end of the day. It's how many leads can you feed them.
Yeah.
And as long as you can feed them an infinite number of leads, you know, and everything else works, then it will drive more money at the end of it. And so we really, really leaned into that because none of us had sales experience. Like none of us ever worked in a company like that. So
yeah. But the guy that told you that invested?
So the guy that told me about predictable revenue,
the guy that said this is the, you know, if you don't, or
no,
97%.
And I know,
no.
I don't remember. I say this because I don't remember which VC it was. I think it was, and I told this to Redpoint because our Redpoint led our Series A. I think it was Redpoint. I'm like 99% sure it was a Redpoint final interview. And so I have a couple people that I think I know who that was. But it wasn't Lemkin.
Okay. So you did your Series A. How much was that?
So we raised, I think 2.5 or 3 million. And on like a 10 or 12, and which we thought was incredible. Like we were it, you know, we'd made it at that point.
So that was what year?
That was probably, maybe 2015 or so, 2015, 2016. So we'd already been kind of out there for 3 or 4 years.
Okay.
Just sort of like financing the business with upfront annual contracts. I mean, that was basically the only way.
So you started in 2012. You said 2022 before. I didn't think that.
Excuse me. Yeah, 2012. Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
So that's when you started Gather, and then 3 years later raised your Series A.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Cool. We made every mistake in the book, but like the smartest thing that we did, I remember, we had this preconceived notion that if you're going to sell in restaurants, you have to own New York. Mm-hmm. That was like our thing. We knew that for a fact. You got to own New York. It's the only way restaurant stuff works. Like you win New York, win everything else. That's how Open Table worked. But there was a competitor of ours that was like really good in New York. And we basically, it was like, Alex is going to move to New York. So I would fly up to New York on a Monday, and I would just walk around New York, just taking in-person meetings, in-person meeting after in-person, trying to sell as many deals as I possibly could. And I come home every week with nothing. I mean, I'm like, you know, stayed in a terrible hotel, you know, in the terrible part of town. I'd come home with nothing. We did it about 4 weeks in a row, and I came back and I was like, Nick, like, I'm getting crushed up here. You know, I don't.
Because the competitor had already like totally.
It wasn't novel.
It
wasn't novel, and it was like, who do you work with? Like these guys work with, you know, Danny Meyer's groups, and these guys work with all the Michelin stars. Who do you work with? And they're like, well, we work with, you know, like Tom Murphy's, you know, down in Atlanta, and they're like, I don't even know who that is.
Go home, hillbilly.
Yeah. So I came home and I was like, man, like, look, like we've got 2 options. Like I understand that like we got to win New York, but like option 1 is like, I can just continue to grind it out, and I'll go up there every week, and I'm just going to go in a knife fight every single time, and I got to beat these like incumbents. Or we could just say, it, we're never going to New York. We're going to go everywhere else. Like we're going to go to every other market, and we're just going to go where we're the only person who's ever done this before, and we're going to clean up, and then one day we'll come back to New York, and when we do, we're going to say we're a national brand, and everybody knows us, and then we can go do it. So we just crossed out New York and San Francisco on our you know, Salesforce, and we went to Chattanooga and Nashville and Austin, Texas, and Boulder and Seattle and Portland, and we scooped
the pincher
up.
Move. So wherever they are, go surround them.
We basically, we called the oil drop method. We were like, we're just going to go in all these different places, and eventually, you know, we'll be the people. And man, we aced it. I mean, everywhere we went in these mid-market cities, we were the only people in. We could just go through. We'd win all the best deals. There's no competitor. And then a couple of years later, you know, we were now pretty big. You know, we had caught up to Triple Seat. They had, you know, a multi-year lead on us, and we kind of caught up in probably the same, you know, size of revenue or roughly close. And we said, all right, now we're going to go take New York.
So it's like 5 to 10 million, 20 to 30. Like we're in the zone of revenue.
So in this point, we're probably in like the 5 million range.
Okay. And this is like maybe a year or two after the like 2017, 2018 kind of thing.
It's like right around that time. Yeah. It's right around that time. Gosh, we still never really got New York. I mean, we still tried to do it. We ended up acquiring Triple Seat, you know, and that's ultimately how we did it. They were embedded in there, and they had a good solution too. But if we hadn't have made that decision, we would have never been able to succeed. And I think the interesting thing about that business, and now I'm seeing it at GreenPlaces, is you start companies thinking that you're going to leave everything open to chance. Like I don't know anything and I'm going to just learn it as I go. But every decision is like, to me, it's just like it's like an unwinding of something that I originally thought. When we were originally selling, Gather, we thought you can only sell restaurants in person. That's how restaurant people are. So we did that for a while and it didn't work. And then we talked to these guys down in Charleston, People Matter. And they said, what the hell are you doing? Like, we sell everything, remote. We sold Subway remote. Yeah. And we were like, oh, okay, we'll do that. And then it started to work. And, restaurants will only pay monthly contracts. They'll never pay up front. Eventually we started to ask people for it. And they said, oh yeah, of course we'll pay up front. We're happy to do that. Like, and it's just like all of these things. You got to win New York, but you really don't. And so it's just a lot of these like unwinding things that I think, had we been too obstinate to like if we believed in what we thought too much, then I think we would have never really got there. But probably because we had failed so miserably for 2 years, nobody ever felt like the idea they had was a good one. Yeah. It was at best sort of a test and an idea.
Yeah. Cool. So then tell us, let's wrap up Gather and then I want to make sure we get into GreenPlaces. So tell us, so you got big enough, you acquired your competitors. So that was good.
So we acquired the competitor after Vista, but basically what happened was we had gotten to the point where we needed to raise more money and we were going to raise a Series B, but we didn't feel like we had a strong enough case to go get a B. So we went back to Storm and said, what do you think about doing like a little bridge round? And they were like, look, we're supportive of you. We're happy to do a bridge round, but why don't you go out and test the market? Because I think you guys probably could. So we went out and we started talking to people, and lo and behold, we did have a lot of interest. And Vista came calling and said, we've got a whole playbook on your business, and we'd like to take a majority stake.
Yeah, so this is Vista Equity, a private equity firm, and they either do buyouts, so they buy 100% of something, or like a 52% kind of a thing.
And they owned Cvent at the time, and Cvent was just this juggernaut business, and that's one of the reasons why they had a file on us, which we didn't really realize until later, but they knew a lot about our business, and I think
because you touched the event space.
We touched the space.
Tangentially, yeah.
Exactly. Okay. And basically, they just opened up a new fund where they were going to start doing still majority investments, but it was like more flexible for like smaller stuff. And I think we were one of the first, few companies that actually did that. Now they do a lot of those things, but at the time it was very unproven for Vista. They were very like we're going to go buy info blocks or.
Yeah. And the pitch to entrepreneur is stay on. So we're going to get you some liquidity. So we're going to buy more than half the company. You get some money off the table, and then there'll be and then it gets really complicated, but you'll own some equity in this new thing sometimes. And so you'll get kind of a double shot. So and they'll put some money in there, and then you'll kind of get to still be the team and run.
Well, and what we said was, they gave us, you can sell this amount of shares, but the rest, needs to roll in, and we're going to buy out the rest of the cap table. We're going to give you this amount of money and you can go run the business. And basically like the way Nick and I kind of looked at it as entrepreneurs is, we're on paper still really poor. I mean, we're still in the attic, you know, and increasingly we'd be out to dinner with investor types and lawyers and all that stuff. We'd be out to dinner and like they'd like in the check thing coming around. Yeah. And like I couldn't cover the check. Yeah. So it was like this dance of like who's gonna pay. And I didn't want to be ungrateful, but I was like, if I pay that bill tonight, it is not as problematic for me.
You get really good at like not looking at that half of the table because the bill is over there. And if you make eye contact with that thing, you're gonna own it.
And we'd go back, we would go back to my house or Nick's house and, go out to a dive bar or something like that and just talk about it. And it was just like one of those things where I was like 99.99% of all of my net worth of everything that I've ever done is living in this equity. And while I'm hanging out with CEOs and successful people, we're different. When they're talking about going to visit the Turks and Caicos, I'm like, I've not left Atlanta in a really long time and I don't have a path to do that. And it's this mismatch. And one of the things that we liked about the Vista deal, was like, we were able to get cash off the table, which is really important for us because one is it allowed us to be able to like live, like we could actually live and actually start to like do things. But in our decision making, when you get to that point, like you're no longer making like long-term decisions. Yeah. Like if you're that levered up in your own business, like compared to like your own personal wealth, it's impossible to make the decisions that are needed to make. And what we basically had talked to ourselves about was like, I can't even run this business the way that it should because I'm too afraid at this point. Like when we started it, I had nothing to lose. Now I have everything to lose. Mm-hmm. And so it was weighing into everything that
go be conservative because that's your nest. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Can you say like the zone that first deal was in? Was that like a,
So that was, so I think the valuation they put on us was like somewhere in like the 65, 70 million. Mm-hmm. It was a good, healthy valuation, realistic compared to where we were. We were able to cash out, a percentage of our shares, which was really great.
And then the cap table you had some VC, so they got their piece.
They got their piece. They got paid. Yeah. The night that we did that was like the best night ever. We, me, Nick, and Tom went and bought large pizzas ourselves and the nicest bottle of wine we could find, each of us. And then we sat in a room and we called all these guys that invested in like Frequenter. Mm-hmm. Like called Tom, Murphy. We called Fred. We called. And I mean, it was like, we're talking to people who were like, I didn't even remember what the name of this thing was.
Because they probably invested in this thing at $5 million and they got a 10x or something.
They invested way less.
Their 25K became 250K. Yeah,
25K. They got 40x return.
Yeah, wow.
So these guys were like,
so 25K became $1 million. Yeah.
So I remember I talked to one guy and he was like, he was in the middle of a Food Lion, and he just starts like dropping the F-bomb, and I was like, what is it? And he was like, he basically was like, I lost my job because like I had a heart condition and the stress was too much. I'm basically like north of food stamps. I'm buying discount meat right now at Food Lion. And he was like, I've had a job in 2 years. And, he was like, this is going to change my life. He's like, I can't wait to get home and like tell my wife and all that stuff. Tom was telling me that something fell in his restaurant and it was going to basically, he'd overextended his restaurants and he was like, this could like end this business. Like this is my family business for 30 years. I'm not going to be able to afford it. And he was able to pay for it.
Mm-hmm. Anyone not believe you?
No, they were like, it was more like, I didn't know you guys still existed. Yeah. Like, it was like, I don't remember what was the business called? Like, it was like it was like the I did what moment. Yeah. And we would just, you're about to get $800,000. So like, give me your wiring instructions. I'm sending it over. I mean, it was awesome.
Yeah. I had that one time where I told someone they were going to make 800 and they're like, they had put in like 25K and they're like, oh man, well, at least it's not zero. And I was like, no, 800K. And they're like, what?
Yeah. It was awesome. Yeah. And we had early employees. We got to do that stuff too. We'd, call them in like, here's 250,000 or whatever. And it's just a really cool moment.
Yeah. Awesome. So then you sold half the business to Vista, and they have this kind of really famous playbook, Rule of 40 and all this jazz. So you got to kind of learn all that. How did that go?
It was good. They're really smart. Like what I would say about Vista was like really, really smart people. And I think they learn really fast. So I think when we started, there were things that, again, we were like one of the smallest companies. We were definitely the youngest founding team that they had, I think, ever invested in at the time. And
were you 30 yet?
No.
Okay. So you're like in your late 28.
No, it's 2007. I was 29, 28. Yeah. And in fact,
so you were a millionaire by the time you were 30?
It's true. Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty wild.
I went to the Vista conference. Like they do a conference every year in Carlsbad and it's awesome. And they like they basically create a Vista hotel and you're hanging out with like the CEO of like Marketo and the Infoblox guys and Ping Identity and like all these people. And Vista buys like the whole hotel for the weekend.
Yeah.
And I went down to the cocktail hour and like they denied me like a glass of wine and I had to like go back up to my room and like get a passport and be like, I'm like real. Like I'm like still, able to drink.
Isn't their CEO kind of wacky and he's like really into fly fishing and stuff? And they always do these events where he can fish or something. It
was one of the most incredible experiences. I saw a guy get a plane on stage. Like they had, when we pulled up at the first one, they had like 4 or 5 cars out front. It was like a, Ferrari, Lamborghini, whatever. And like the license plates were like Fund 1, Fund 2, Fund 3. I think one of those guys is like friends with Drake. Like, so like Drake would play and stuff. Like Neil deGrasse Tyson was hanging out. Like he was just like walking around all the time. Like it was just crazy stuff and so much success. I mean, these guys were cranking out, 3, 4x returns. Yeah. And So it was a good experience. I think they had to learn a lot of like our stage. So there's a lot of things where it was like, let's come to the session and learn about how to sell to, or, how to manage millennials. And I was like, well, I'm a millennial and all of us are, so I don't really need this.
Yeah.
And they're like, let's talk about like implementing, Workday. And I was like, we're like not going to implement Workday, but they learn fast. Like they do really learn fast, and they were able to help us with a lot of things.
So, all right. So you're at Vista, you're doing the whole thing.
Yeah.
So you bought one of your competitors. Give us a synopsis of what happened post Vista, and then ultimately you're going to decide to leave.
So I was there for about 2 or 3 years post acquisition. We're trying to grow. We're re-implementing new stuff. Like, we're now at the point in the business where, like I said, our ACV was like, at this point, it's like $1,700. But to grow millions year over year and to continue to achieve a growth rate, we had hit a really hard point where we were so heavily reliant on outbound sales and low ACVs that to be able to get to those, it was really hard. And so we had a tough year. It was a tough year. We had brought in extra help. We had all kinds of folks in the business trying to do things. I think a lot of the mistakes that I made, and I think a lot of the executive team probably would agree, is I think we assumed the identity of us being a much bigger company than we were. I think we sort of now that we were, a Vista company, we want to act like it. We wanted to make the decisions that these guys make. We kind of lost, I think, a lot of our obvious decisions, and
lose your edge.
The way I described it was I would walk into meetings and then be like, where's your PowerPoint? And I was like, oh, I didn't get my PowerPoint in today. But for years after that, there's no PowerPoints. You're just going in, you're talking about stuff. And so I think we had a lot of challenges in kind of getting to that next phase of growth for us. And the business would grow, but just not really at the level that we really wanted it to. And meanwhile, Triple Seat was in a fight with us. We were about the same size, and it was we'd steal one of their clients, they'd steal one of our clients, and we'd steal it back.
At this point, we were 20 million or so, or what?
No,
still smaller?
No, we're probably, I don't know, we're probably in the 10-ish type range.
Got it.
And basically, it was just back and forth and back and forth. And I think on a personal piece for me, this is the time I started having kids. And I didn't want to be in Atlanta. That's not really where, my wife and I, we really liked Atlanta in our 20s, but we wanted to have kids in Raleigh. That's where we wanted to live. And we had kind of had a number of discussions related to family and family health and kids and stuff. And basically I was I think in the nicest way possible, she's like, look, I put up with this. I've done my part and I've supported you through everything. There's got to be a time where we can go and set up roots. And because we knew we wouldn't be in Atlanta forever, it was hard for us to do that. And, I ultimately said, guys, I got to move up to Raleigh, and I got to figure out a way to make it work remotely.
Why Raleigh? Was that just from your time in Chapel Hill, or does your wife have a connection to Raleigh?
My wife's from Roxborough.
Okay.
And a lot of her family lives in Raleigh. So she's got multiple siblings. We're all close, and we got nieces and nephews and stuff like that all in here. And so we just decided that was the place where we wanted to be. It was kind of the best of all the things. And it was always in our plan to go. It was just one of those things. I think this is where a lot of entrepreneurs get stuck, is you get so good at just putting your head down and moving forward that you don't take a look around and be able to stop. You get these guys that are if I don't make another 100 million, I'm never going to do it. And it's you just keep being unhappy. And so I think what Ann was basically kind of helping me understand is your life is still existing. You've done a great job. You can still grow a great business. You can be a part of this. You can do all the things you want to do. But we want to have a family. We want to have our life as well. And at some point you've got to start, investing in that.
Yeah.
And so we made the difficult decision to come up here. And I would say we made it work decently well. The travel started to get to me a little bit of especially as the kids got a little older. And
what year was that?
This was 2019, I would say.
Okay.
And it kind of got to the point of if you're not going to be in Atlanta, we're going to build everything here, and it's just not going to be the right place, to do this.
Yeah.
And so we parted ways, basically the end of the year, 2019, going into 2020.
COVID, spoiler alert, COVID's coming. So this is probably not a terrible decision.
Well, when your business is literally like defined by large party reservations, at restaurants
that need to be open.
Our business was illegal. And like of the simulations, to have your business model be completely illegal and to lose like that, right? Like to be like, okay, I'm going to lose not because my product's not good, not because people don't want it, but literally what you sell is an illegal thing to offer was crazy.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of stress because I still owned a lot of equity. So I wasn't involved, but I was a lot of equity in the business.
Yeah.
And when COVID happened, I was pretty convinced it was going to zero.
Yep.
And I would say that Vista did a really great job over that period. So right before that is when we bought Triple Seed. So we had doubled the revenue of the company. When that happened, the headcount dropped off very quickly, which was really tough and really hard. But they were like, look, this is to save the business. Like we have to get to profitability like very quickly and have our ability to wait this out. And at the same time, so one of the things that our software did was like we collected credit cards. So if you booked a restaurant for a wedding or something like that, a lot of times you have to like give them a physical like number and they like hold on to it. Well, if you read the stories in the news where they were like, I planned my wedding, but like the venue is going to hold on to my deposit and they didn't cancel it. They just said, we'll just push it out. Those were the companies using Gather. And if they didn't, they weren't able to do those things. And so when we would talk to restaurants and stuff, they were like, look, like 30% of my revenue is living in your software. And if I drop your software, I kiss all that money goodbye.
And so
exactly. Yeah. So they basically were like, here's the deal. Like we're either going to go out of business, or if we don't, we're going to have your system in place because we need to have all that money back.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. So they didn't sell a lot. Like they sold some, they didn't sell a lot. But they basically gave payment forgiveness to a lot of these people. They battened down the hatches in terms of profitability, and they just waited it out and said, look, if the restaurant industry recovers, we're going to be the best people to position to win. And that's exactly what happened. At the tail end of COVID, it started to come back out, and people started to pay again, and they started to buy things. And the business was 1,000,000 times more profitable than it was. And then suddenly like growth and growth and growth. And meanwhile, all of our competitors went out of business.
Yep.
So they were basically
brush fire that takes out all the small stuff.
And the business is it's a juggernaut. It's an amazing company. And so
did you sell your equity or you still got a piece of that?
No, I'd kept all of it.
Yeah.
So
nice. And it's still, has Vista traded it around or it's still?
So back about a year and a half ago, General Atlantic bought it for $500 million. And that's when I took all my equity out.
Yeah. Good.
Was
that a good transaction for you?
Yeah. Terrible. No, it was fantastic.
Yeah.
And I'd convinced myself it wasn't going to happen. I'd convinced itself it wasn't.
You mentally have to, because you see all these people that spend that money and then it doesn't become money. And that's a bad thing for them.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. So anyway, COVID's happening. It's 2020. I'm just like having a great time.
Yep.
Like I'm not working. I'd spent 7 years of my life thinking about private events and catering software, which I know everything there could possibly know about that, but nothing else.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm doing all kinds of stuff like trying to learn an instrument, trying to learn a language. We started an investment fund, invested in Spiffy and Levitate and all these businesses. I just absorbed things, and it was like an awesome year of just like waking up and look. I describe it as the feeling of like if you stuck your head in a hole for like 8 years and then you pop out, everything is interesting.
Yeah.
And
because as a founder, you get like so myopic, you have to shut out everything.
Exactly.
So,
that's all you can do.
Yeah. There's some interesting new technology. Don't have time for it. Just gotta
that's all I can think about.
Super focused. Yeah.
So basically about a year and a half from then, I decided that I wanted to start doing something again. Mm-hmm. Like the investing thing was fun, but it really wasn't like what I was interested in doing. And I kind of felt this moment, I think, of like feeling lucky that I had a chance to choose. Like I was like, nobody gets a chance to choose. Like nobody gets a chance to really just say, this is the industry I'm going to work in. Most of us just do what is there, or And so I thought, why not like do something that I think matters? And with the kids, there and on the way, I thought, what would be cooler than to be able to tell, your kids you plant trees or something. So let's do something in sustainability. Let's pick a hard problem there and we'll just go at it from that direction. Mm-hmm. And I got in this habit of basically walking around my neighborhood all day and thinking about ideas and meet with people. So I'd meet with you. Jess Lipson lived like 3 doors down from me. So I'd stop at his pool and we kind of talk about stuff and just did that for 3 or 4 months. I was like into water technologies and all kinds of random stuff. And ultimately what we kind of kept coming back to was like the biggest businesses in the world are going to be able to do this stuff. Like if you really believe in sustainability, you have to believe that everybody has to do it. Like it just doesn't work if like Nike does and nobody else does. Everybody has to do it. And, you know, there's a huge difference between like a Facebook or an Amazon and a Whole Foods and a Patagonia and like everybody else. Yeah. So it's a pretty simple equation. If everybody has to do it, well, like, you know, Facebook's out at this time, like floating like solar panels in the South China Sea. Like, what the hell is everybody else going to do? You know? Yeah. And when you look at it, it's like, that's like 90% of emissions. 93% of like Microsoft's emissions are its supply chain. Like, so these are not big companies and they aren't the people that can go pay somebody $2 million to be a sustainability lead. Yeah. And
there's a pyramid and the companies at the tippy top are going to be able to do it themselves, but there's like, you know,
everybody else.
That pyramid still represents a huge number of companies. Yeah.
Exactly. And so basically what Jess and I kind of came to the conclusion of is like, let's go build like a chief sustainability. Like if these guys, this was a chart, it just said like a big bar chart. And it's like, these guys at the top, like here's Amazon. And then we're like, here's everybody else. So it's like total addressable emissions. It was like everybody. And then the guys at the top. And we said, these guys have chief sustainability officers. These people don't. Mm-hmm. So let's build a software that takes the strategies they came up with and then implements them through technology so that everybody can do it.
Yep.
And we said, chief sustainability officer in a box, let's go out and let's build that business. And that's really where everything kind of started for us.
So if you're a mid-market company, you use your software, you say, you know, where you're located, where your buildings, you can plug into the power utilities and pull all that, and you can get a really good idea of their footprint, their you know, their sustainability footprint, their impact.
Yeah. The way I think about it is like a good analogy, I think, is to like Intuit. Mm-hmm. So in the finance world, you have the people at the very top who have concierge service, like wealth managers, and they make really awesome decisions. And then you have the people at the very bottom that like read Dave Ramsey online and are like, I'll, you know, invest in a Roth IRA. Yeah. Well, like what Intuit did a really great job of is like, if you give us all the data, if you give us all your information, we'll kind of create like a tech-enabled like middle ground. So it's not going to be as good as like the guys that are getting like Morgan Stanley to go read through their stuff, but it's certainly better than just reading an article. Mm-hmm. And what we can do is we can take best practices and then we can like map it to your data and we can make good informed decisions that makes you a healthier finance person. And the same thing is true for sustainability. Like, you know, for a lot of our companies, they don't buy GreenPlaces because they want to be green. Mm-hmm. You know, they don't say like, I want to be Patagonia, so I'm going to buy GreenPlaces. A lot of times they're doing this because like their businesses they sell to want to buy from greener companies. It's a marketplace. You have the Fortune 500 over here that says we're all going to reduce our emissions to zero. We want to find greener suppliers. Yep. And so they survey all their suppliers and they go look for alternatives. Mm-hmm. And then you have all these people on the other side that are like, well, I'm willing to do the work, but if it has an outcome on the end of it. So like they don't have a way to sort of connect to each other. And so we sort of think about it like the way that Intuit would walk you into something like this. We would say, you know, phase one is you're going to connect all your data, which is what we do. So get the data into us and we're going to tell you your score. So Intuit might tell you, here's your credit score. You know, we're going to tell you, here's what your carbon footprint is. Yep. Then with that information, we're going to try to basically give you insights that helps you be a better business. We're going to give you insights that helps you reduce your emissions. We're going to give you insights that help you identify if you're in or out of compliance with a regulation somewhere. We're going to give you tools that help you identify, you know, better suppliers. We're going to give you tools that like help you share this information with other people. We're going to see if we can find cost savings for you. We're just going to kind of use that information like the way that a Mint.com would to say, if we have all the stuff we have from you, what can we use from that to be able to help you stronger?
Yeah, can't change anything you can't measure. So you got to measure it really well first and then you can start moving it around.
Yeah, we have the data and we have a way to be able to look at it. And there's such an opportunity on the other side to be able to use it in ways that are effective. And so we think about like, you don't buy GreenPlaces, you become a green place. And we think about what are the values for doing that. Yeah.
Okay. So you started when?
April of 2021, the day before Earth Day, which is like a massive miss. Yeah. We just waited one more day.
Oops.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you started a business on April 1st, so that's kind of fun. And then you did an interesting round. So you did kind of like a club round. So explain how that came together.
Well, it really came out because Jess Lipson basically like came up with the idea with me. Like he was the guy on that stop that we would just sit around and talk through, like, what are we going to do? And when we had gotten to the point of like, this seems really interesting, Jess said, look, like if you think this is interesting, like give a little time to it. And if you like it, then I'll invest. Like I'll give you some money.
Yep.
So that was a fun conversation with my wife because I got to say, I want to do this again. And she's like, no, but I was like, but Jess said he's going to give me money if I do it. And she was like, that seems a really great idea. She's like, that's perfect. She's like, you got this really smart guy, and he's basically a genius and he's interested in something about you. He finds interesting that he wants to partner on this, which could you pick a better partner? And you've got to built in sort of like co-founder relationship where you can go do something that you're both curious about doing and he's going to help you. And it was just like the best decision ever. So coming back to him and saying, yeah, like I've evaluated, I've looked at it, let's do it. He said, okay, cool. Like I'm going to, fund your first round. But what would be cool is if maybe we could get some other guys that would do this too. And that's when we reached out to you and Todd at Pendo and Joe Colopy and Chaz Felix and basically all the guys that had started software companies and basically said, this is what we believe in. This is what we want to do. Would you like to support it? And I think I certainly have a lot of belief in myself, but I think most of those guys were like, if Jess is going to do this, like I trust him. And so I think like his ability to, I think have built up, decades of trust really, really, really changed our trajectory and probably amongst anything else influenced the outcome of the business for him to be there.
Yeah. So let's summarize. So you did kind of a seed round or a pre-seed, and then you did a seed, which brought in Felicis Ventures.
Yeah.
From the Bay Area. And then you did Redpoint.
Yep.
So how much have you guys raised at this point? And give us an idea, like where is this, how many people in the business, where's revenue kind of in a
so we have about a little over 40 people in the business. We've raised just about $17 million. We have lots of that still undeployed and in the bank. We're in that kind of like 3 to 10, like, meat grinder in the business where things have really worked. We've got a great set of like MVP customers. We're starting to get dominance in a number of sectors. I think like 15 or 20% of the top 100 law firms use GreenPlaces. I think we now have like 5 of the top 100 staffing firms. We work with most of the software companies people have heard about that are kind of in that path to becoming public. And we're starting to get a name for ourselves and it's really working. And what we need to do from here is not necessarily new things, but it's to basically make sure that as we're growing and adding more layers in the business, we don't lose that sort of edge to results. I think this is the dangerous part. And I look back at my own history and I think this is kind of the time when Vista came in and I don't want to make that mistake twice.
Yeah.
So we're really trying to like look at unit economics and make sure that like we're not just like pouring gasoline on something that isn't working. We just really want to build that predictability in the business.
Yeah. So you've had success now, and I get this a lot. People are like, "Why do you dress like this?" And why do you just like meet all these people? Why are you you're relatively humble. You're a very approachable guy. Are you still cheap? Why has this not gone to your head?
Well, I think it has gone to my head. I think I just, I feel like I exude, confidence. No, I don't know. I think it's because I think it's just like a game and it's fun. I feel like I'm playing a sport and I wasn't really good at sports, but like this kind of like is that for me. And I don't know. Like I think I never really like people who are really like pretentious about stuff. I like people, it doesn't matter. I don't care where anybody works or what anybody does. I just sort of like enjoy my life and enjoy like hanging out with people. And I'm probably the cheapest person ever. I drive an old car that has duct tape is holding the passenger window open, which is probably not a very safe thing, know. But I like spending money on things I like to do.
Yeah,
I like traveling. I like looking at stuff. I don't need to stay in a fancy hotel. Like I like to travel and hang out and enjoy my life and have experiences. I don't get a lot of pleasure in dressing really nicely or having really nice things. I think I have 4 kids and that's incredibly expensive, but I would spend money on them and that experience than I would with anything else. And it's not to say that if somebody was like, I don't want to have kids and I want to live in a penthouse in New York, like they can do that too.
Yeah.
You know, but I do have like a Porsche. It's just not a Porsche. It's like 4 kids who, you know, eventually are going to have to go to college and stuff. Like the money is being spent. It's just probably being spent on different things. And it's probably just how I was raised.
Cool. Well, we're up against time. I appreciate you spending so much time on this. I'd never heard any of your gather stories. So those were, I've lived many of the GreenPlaces stories, but we want to get those. So we want to have you back at some point to give us an update, maybe in a year or something like that. And then we can get into more of the GreenPlaces stories. Yeah. Thanks for being so generous with your time and sharing very candid stories for other founders. I think that'll help them a lot.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And thanks for having me on, and appreciate being part of the Tweener family.
Absolutely.
For more Tweener content, check out the Triangle Tweener Times Substack at tweener.substack.com. For more Tweener content, check out tweenertimes.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again soon on Triangle Tweener Talks.